Alright, we are recording for chapter 5 of Wrath of Khan within this book. Um, it, I like the chapter. I'm just. It starts off on the Enterprise with Peter, catching up a little bit with him. We then have Kirk showing Spock and McCoy the Genesis summary, and then we come to Regular 1. Sorry, Regulus 1. I think in the movie it's Regular 1, though. And there's a lot in it, and I do like it a lot. It is one of those funny things that where there's technically not that many notes and technically not that many highlights, but it's like I don't feel like highlighting full pages, actually multiple pages, because I'm certainly not going to be able to read it all out loud to this. Anyway, so yeah, Peter apparently, yes, about 2 days have passed, it seems, and Scotty is giving Peter a hard time. And it's like constantly nothing is right. He's always finding fault there. Well, no, I shouldn't put it that way. Not finding fault. It's he's always like checking Peter's station over, and always there's something wrong there, and tells him he has to redo the work, kind of thing. It's also interesting. Something else he does is Peter had apparently been standing at attention for an hour because Scotty was going to come and inspect it at like 11, but didn't come for an hour. So Peter was just standing there at attention the entire time. Which, on the one hand, yes, that's what Peter should be doing there. On the other hand, though, I really dislike this because I don't believe that should be Scotty's behavior. I don't think he'd treat anyone like that. Because it is just wholly unfair, and I don't think he should be that unfair, that unjust towards somebody. It doesn't matter that he's family member or not. It still is a no, Scotty. This is well beyond what you would normally do. So I do not care for. But Peter does have one thing to comfort him, sort of. Dannon said there are times when you have to stick up for yourself, but there are times when you have to prove you can take whatever they can dish out. And he is recognizing this is a time you have to just take it. And he is. There's also, he learns that the guy who's next to him, another trainee, Granny is the name. Now Peter learns that, oh crap, he heard that Scotty's my uncle. And it's like, even if no one else in engineering heard that, and it was just Granny, they all know now. So that's who Granny is. Okay. So we now get to the whole Kirk is just worried. He's not sure what's going on and all that with Genesis. And as he's saying this and basically trying to get Spock's advice, Spock has the line of, if I knew what Genesis was, I might be able to help you. So then Kirk has to weigh it and decides, yep, come on, Spock, we're going to go to my quarters. Or tell McCoy to meet us there. Goes there and goes through the technical stuff to get permission to view the records, to view the summary. Which, one thing about that occurred to me, and this is, and technical aside is even how I put it in here, all he has to do is verify himself. It's like, the computer would know that there's other people in the room with him. It should both be a security measure and just policy that Kirk puts in, and I am informing Captain Spock and whatever rank McCoy is. Excuse me. It's actually funny, I finally watched the motion picture today. There were issues with watching it sooner and scheduling. It actually looked like McCoy's uniform had the same 2 bars to indicate Captain, the same rank as Kirk, who also had the 2 bars. But I'm not sure. They might not have had the rank insignia as figured out for that movie, though. So, but in any case, it still is. Yeah, that actually should be part of it. Then we get a far more technical description of what Genesis does in the book than in the movie. So this is part of the summary. Genesis is a procedure by which the molecular structure of matter is broken down not into subatomic particles as in nuclear fission, or even into elementary particles, but into sub-elementary particle waves. I have an issue with that. We'll move on. These can then, by manipulation of various nuclear forces, only two, be restructured into anything else of similar mass. There's 4 fundamental forces of the universe, though I'm pretty sure last I'd seen 3 of them have been unified, so technically 2 then, but gravity's a weird one, electromagnetic, and then there's the strong and weak nuclear forces. And it's actually funny how some of those work out. But one thing very interesting, this very much an aside, about the strong, so gravity and EM, both of those have technically unlimited range. It diminishes, yes, but it technically goes forever. Strong and weak don't do that. They actually have a limit. That past that, they cease to be. It's a weird thing, but it's kind of neat. Anyway. No, the actual technical issue I have here is, but into sub-elementary particle waves. So, that's not how elementary particles work. Which, by the way, they're already particle waves. I mean, but if it's elementary, that means there is nothing below it. I mean, I get the whole, technically the periodic table of elements is incorrect in that regard because there are lesser parts to it, but when they were first discovered and figured out, we didn't know that. But it still is, like, an electron is an elementary particle. It is not made of anything else. Not only that, I'm pretty sure it also counts as a singularity. That is a single point in space. It doesn't have volume to it. So yeah, it's like, there isn't a sub-elementary thing unless you're saying that there's a whole new set of particles that exist below some of these things. Unless you're going to argue that, which I don't think anyone is. I'm not familiar with that being a theory at the time. I mean, I guess kind of, sort of, because I don't recall nucleons, protons, neutrons, and some others are made up of quarks. Which quarks actually do get mentioned in here as well. Protons and neutrons are made of 3 quarks each. I think it's 2 up, 1 down for a proton, 2 down, 1 up for a neutron. I think it is mentioned here. Hang on. No, it must be a little later. They technically have fractional charges. Quarks are wild, but in any case, I don't believe that there's anything smaller than a quark. Well, correction. I don't believe there's anything that the quarks are comprised of. I think they are elementary particles, unless you want to get into string theory kind of stuff, which says that they are these string things that the quarks are made from. Unless it's that, but string theory, which one, for one thing? 'Cause there's a lot. It's one of those things where somebody had a great idea with string theory, but it doesn't work. So instead of being like, well, let's move on, they said, okay, we're just going to take it and change it. Oh, well, that one doesn't work. Okay, we're going to change again. Okay, well, that one doesn't work. Okay, we're going to change again. Well, that one doesn't work. Okay, we're going to change again. I'm sorry, it's just one of those things that annoys me because people will treat it as like, oh, this is wonderful, this is amazing, this describes everything. It's like, we never use it because it's never right. Well, at least not right in all cases. So it's also like, in particle physics, there's something called the Standard Model that is what currently defines all particles and predicts where many are as well. We know it's wrong. There is, and it is one of those funny things. We know the Standard Model is wrong, but we've yet to find any replacement that is better than it. So it stands. String theory, in theory, is supposed to replace it. It can't. It never even gets up to match that level. I'll also add this one other thing. I'm sorry, another aside. Some of you may have heard the idea that, oh, there's 7 or 9 dimensions to the universe. The origin of that is string theory, sort of. In that, no. It's not that string theory is saying that there's 7 or 9 dimensions, and it's a specific variant of string theory. It's not saying that they must exist. No. If string theory is true, we need those 7, we need to be 7 or 9 dimensions because the math doesn't work otherwise. So it's not that, oh, there are these 7 or 9 dimensions. It's we need that to be true, or else the papers we have written are utterly meaningless. I'm sorry, I kind of like Occam's razor, and I wish I could remember the quote that Einstein had, because he also had something along the lines of, basically, if you're getting this stuff really complicated, it's probably wrong. And he came up with general relativity, which is, well, okay, it can get complicated, but general relativity, not that I know that well, there is still a certain elegance to its concepts. String theory, from my very, very limited knowledge of it, I am not aware of it having such elegance. And certainly the fact that you keep having to, nope, can't use that one, let's change it to this, nope, that doesn't work, nope, that doesn't work. That implies to me it's not very elegant. Anyway. But it's still, this is an interesting concept here that can then be manipulated by restructuring into anything else of similar mass. So essentially they're talking about alchemy, that's what they have managed with Genesis, that by by converting mass back into energy, that then you can change the waves involved, so that when it returns to mass, it's something else. Okay, I'm going to read this next portion before I continue with that, because I actually do like this description. It's a very interesting concept. There are issues with it, technically, and there's also an issue, well, a question that I have concerning Star Trek science that follows from this. The Genesis wave disassociates matter into a homogeneous mass of real and virtual sub-elementary particles. Real and virtual particles. Let's just go with that. The forces of gravity and rotation. Oh, okay. So this is while we're actually seeing the demonstration that the computer graphics that's in the movie. The forces of gravity and rotation warred until it became clear that no structure remained to the planet at all. So this is a simulation of what happens if you shoot a planet with the Genesis torpedo. The sub-elementaries re-aggregate instantaneously. An entire world had become a translucent cloud. The mass spread into a disk and almost as quickly coalesced again, reenacting planetary evolution at 1 billion times the speed. I don't think that's necessarily required, but moving on. Precisely what they reform into depends on the complexity of the quantum resonances of the original Genesis wave and on the available mass. If sufficient matter is present, the programming permits an entire solar system to be formed. The simulation, however, this simulation, however, deals only with reorganization of a planetary body. So, technically, this is one of those things where quantum mechanics, and this is part of the reason why they want to come up with something like string theory. Quantum mechanics already tells us all matter exists both as particle as wave and as wave. So the idea here is, what if you could return matter into a wave and then alter the wave? I guess maybe envision it this way. It's not a great analogy, but in a way it may get us there. Imagine you have a block of ice, okay, that is some shape, and you want to change its shape. So you do two things. One is you start playing some audio tone, right? Very powerful. May have to be very, very powerful. But you start doing that. You then melt the ice into water. Now that water, because of the tone, is going to be forming, well, if you have it all set up, a standing wave, right? Or at least some sort of wave there that you have controlled by the speaker, right? You then lower the temperature so that it will freeze, and it takes that new shape based on the wave. That's kind of what they're talking about here, but within quantum mechanics. And it's like, in a way, I like that idea. That's actually a very good science fiction idea. Sub-elementary particles are nonsense. I like, that's just technical jargon being thrown in here. It's nonsense. So okay, can take that out, throw it away, and I'm happy now. But the concept itself is actually really, really neat. So I'm good with that. I appreciate that. It does lead to certain issues, though, which is we later see in the Star Trek universe with TNG replicators that can seemingly do this energy into mass. technically also the transporters are doing that as well. So that's a technology that does exist at this time, where it's mass to energy back to mass. The Genesis concept is essentially mass to energy, and then you change the energy to when you bring it back into mass. So in certain ways, it's actually not that transformative of a technology within Star Trek. However, the idea that a single device could do it in a self-propagating way, so a single device can do this to an entire planet, or even a solar system, that I don't care for, because I don't think that the voids make sense. But anyway, or that you could set up an orbit properly, like how it described it, exploding out and then collapsing. No, I don't think that's appropriate. But it could, like, just more so like what's shown in the movie, where it just like reforms everything on the surface. That I'm okay with. Well, not the raising of the mountains, but I'm okay with it taking this and doing that to it. I'm perfectly okay with that. But the idea that it's taking it and then like going like this, and even like snapping pieces off and then putting them back in someone, no, I'm not good with that. That is me just being very technical here. As I said, the concept itself, I actually do like. I think that's a fine concept, a fine science fiction concept. But yeah, and it is that self-propagating aspect to it that might be the thing that's truly novel. I'm just trying, because replicators technically can do. Oh, that's right. Part of also the self-propagating might be the idea that, because a transporter, you have external power. A replicator, external power. It's possible what they're talking about here with Genesis is the idea that you're not just forcing a new matrix, as Spock later puts it, forcing it on there, as in you're just dumping all this energy in there, but that you're actually just returning the mass into the waves, which, yeah, every particle already has waves in the Schrodinger's equations, all that. But like you were able to tap in directly to that and change it there as like at a much lower energy then, because you're operating on something at such a fine, lower, more fundamental level. So like that would make sense to say this is actually a far more impressive technology than it may seem, because as I already said, its description, technically transporters and replicators both have aspects of this, but if it is self-propagating and is essentially connected to the fundamental existence as modifying that of the particles, that's actually pretty neat. Okay. So this is now someone has played and they're talking. Really, Dr. McCoy, you cannot ban knowledge because you distrust its implications. Civilization can be considered an attempt to control new knowledge for the common good. The intent of this experiment is creation, not destruction. Logic, don't give me logic. Don't give me logic. My God, a force that destroys yet leaves what was destroyed still usable? Spock. That's the most attractive weapon imaginable. We're talking about Armageddon, complete, universal, candy-coated Armageddon. Knock it off, Kirk said. Both of you. Genesis is already here, Spock. You don't need to argue for its existence. So I do find this I find interesting, because McCoy's point is completely accurate, and yet it never seemed like, especially David, who's like, oh, we can't let the military get this. It's like, McCoy would basically argue to David, you fucking moron. It is a weapon. Its nature is a weapon. That's all this is. Why are you acting so they'll make it you have built a weapon. Okay? It's like, it would be like you've built an dynamite. You've come up with dynamite, and now you're upset people are using it to explode things. Which, by the way, Nobel was kind of bothered by that. That's why I came up with the Nobel Peace Prize. But it was dynamite had a use outside of warfare. But yeah, no, because the Nobel family, they were a chemical company. They made explosives, and Alfred was particularly bothered by that. And so he dedicated a portion of the fortune to the Nobel Peace Prize because he didn't want the Nobel legacy to just be a means of destruction. I'm not sure when it started expanding to include other things than peace. But then it is also the Nobel Committee has not always made good choices for who has received certain things, certain prizes. Anyway, I'm just checking my notes. Am I missing? No. Okay. So the next thing I have here, because now it's Kirk is like, Spock, do you know any of the people that were involved with this? Just to gauge familiarity. I'm not going to try to pronounce their names, but two of the scientists are Delton, which I've mentioned before. One a quantum physicist, the other a mathematician. Neither is well known because their work is not translatable from the original Delton, but the work itself contains fascinating implications. How do you know that? I'm sorry, but it's like, this is stupid. So you're basically saying, oh yeah, it's great. It's gibberish to you. Well, yeah, but it's great. I mean, it's like, what are we talking about? Modern art? I mean, it's... And also, why would it have not been... Like, it is intranslatable from the original Delton. What? It's gibberish! It's useless then! Now, granted, people have actually have written up gibberish studies, in part by asking AI to do it, submitted it, and gotten them through peer-reviewed journals. So, our tolerance for gibberish in science is actually already terribly low. But it's still... That's a stupid statement! And yes, that is a real thing. It's actually happened multiple times. That's the worst part. And not, by the way, it has happened again in this new era of AI, but even in older, like a decade or two ago. AI is a lot older than people realize. But even before that, when just generating, people have done that and gotten it through peer-reviewed journals, which is one of those things where people think peer review means that it's more reliable. That is not what that means, sadly. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, because I once did see an explanation for peer review. But it's basically, somebody looked at it, said this seems right, and then moved on. Not that it's been actually reviewed to say that, yes, this is correct, as though it has been repeated, or anything like that. Because it is also, there have been various peer-reviewed studies that turned out to be fraudulent. Well, why didn't peer review catch that? Because peer review technically isn't about that. Yeah. Sorry. The really sad thing is that some of the peer review stuff, it's a scam. And when I say that, I don't mean that the people involved, like the reviewers and the scientists going to the journals, I'm not saying it as though they are part of the scam. Maybe some are. But there is that aspect, and this is why you see open access journals being pushed very hard by some, is to submit to a peer-reviewed journal, or to even be a subscriber to a peer-reviewed journal, can be crazy expensive. Like, to submit can cost you hundreds of dollars. They benefit from publishing it, if they choose to. But you have to pay them for that. And then it still costs like hundreds or even thousands of dollars for a subscription to then see the journal. And there is a certain aspect of it that is, well, we have to, to have the money for the paying for the peer review process. But it's like, yeah, okay, but is it actually worth that much? Or are you just realizing that most of the times it's like a university paying for it? So it's like, they've got millions, and many of them do have millions of dollars just sloshing around. We can take some of that. It's like, yeah. It's kind of like the whole thing with grant money and even tuition loans, where because it gets so accessible, that then it just inflates things and you've got a bubble. Open access journals are basically trying to burst that bubble. And not that there isn't a purpose, a value to peer review, but it does have various problems to it, and that I can't think of the word. All I can think of is like to say industry, which isn't the right word, but complex, I guess. It doesn't have any reason to change because the only competition are open access journals, but some people look down them because, oh, those are open access, they're not peer reviewed. It's like, so what? And it's also oh, well, I don't have to pay hundreds of dollars to read that, so it must not be so good. It's like, what? There's a lot of things where, yeah, you pay hundreds of dollars for it, or thousands of dollars, or tens of dollars, and it's not worth it. Anyway. Okay. This is where we get a little bit of the quark stuff, and some more sub-elementary particle stuff, which is wrong. Spock actually attended a conference that had two of them talking. Madison and March, Dell and Vance. Vance and Dell. It's Vance, Madison, and Dell March. Quarks have, and it's like he's just reminiscing on it. Quarks have fractional charges of 1/3 or 2/3, and attributes such as charm and strangeness. This is true. Like there's the up. Okay, I don't remember all of the names. Up and down, top and bottom, charm and love, I think, are the 6 different types of quarks. That's what they are in fact named. And generally they are referred to as strange matter. But not always good at scientists are not always good at coming with names. But there is, by the way, a hypothetical concept of a strange star. You might want to look that up. That's kind of wild, but in any case. But yes, and it is 1/3 or 2/3 charges, as we know them, positive and negative. Quarks also have what's called a color charge. To be clear, at the point we're talking about quarks, we're just making it all up. And I don't mean that as in... No, there is in fact a color charge. That is a real thing, but the name to it is being given there because it's like red, green, and blue. And it's like there's 3, and it's just that's the easiest way to label them. It's also, is there really such a thing as a 1/3 positive charge? Not exactly, but it's how the math works out. It's what the math tells us. So we're gonna go with that. It does fall kind of into that way. It's like it's the only way to explain it that it makes sense. If we try to explain it more accurately, we might not even be able to because it doesn't really make sense in that way. Because I mean, it is like proton has a positive charge, electrons have a negative charge. Electrons are a fundamental particle. Protons aren't. They're composed of by quarks, which 3 of them together form this one charge. So there would seem to be a third between them. But then there's the mixing of it being like 2 up, 1 down, then 1, and then 2 down, 1 up, and bounce between protons and neutrons. It's like it has to work out that way. But in some ways, it makes no sense. It is funny how some of this works, but it's just I'm not being dismissive of this. I'm not being critical of quantum mechanics in that way. Not like I just was with the peer review stuff. I'm not. It's just it helps when you step back and realize it is, at least as far as naming goes and certain conventions, it's all made up. That doesn't mean they're not of value. They are. But it is technically all made up. And I could believe that for some people it may help them to realize, yeah, the name doesn't matter. Just what is going on here. That's what's going on. Okay, now I understand that. I don't need to worry about what the hell a love quark is. Or charm quark. I'm pretty sure love is also one of them. I think it's love and charm that typically go together. But yeah, it's also, why are we measuring mass in terms of electron volts, in terms of energy? Because we don't have a concept of mass at this scale. So how does it... Just go with it. Some of it is a... Well, okay. Just go with it isn't a great answer to the problem. But it is, like I said, it is just so abstract that we are just putting names on things because it makes... for what it's doing, it's making sense. But it is also a kind of borderline nonsensical thing you have to deal with. Which I still feel I'm doing a lousy job of trying to explain that. It just... Okay. You know what? This may work. This may work. To try the same kind of concept. X, Y, and Z as dimensions. ignore the names, but it's just, the vertical, horizontal, and depth, right? Well, why is this the vertical, this the horizontal, and this the depth? Why not this the vertical, that the horizontal, and then this the depth? It's that kind of arbitrary, okay? Where it's like there's a value to it being this way versus that rotation. That's kind of what I mean by that, in that it is still kind of arbitrary, but there's a value to the specific arbitrariness that it can be defended, and so that's what we stick to, and that's fine. Oh, hey, I got a book! Yeah, the sub-elementary particles had fractional charges as well. They're not a thing. 4/9 and 1/9, the squares of the quark of the charges of the quarks. Why squaring? I'm not sure. According to Madison, they could be sorted further by 5 unmistakable marks, which the team had proposed designating taste, tardiness, humor, cleanliness, and ambition. And the way it describes the reaction to that is half the audience laughed, half the audience were sat there with offended silence, and Spock was just like, I think that's familiar. What is that? And it's a reference to C.S. Lewis. Sorry, not C.S. Lewis. Lewis Carroll. I mean, there's a Lewis both ways. Anyway, and his... Hang on. Okay, yeah, there's also this. We'd like to propose that the sub-elementary particles be designating smocks and bojums, March had said. When we picked the names, we didn't realize quite how appropriate they were. This is from Lewis Carroll's description of a snark. Yeah. And as it continues on, and we really get to know a lot more about Dell and Vance, these two, March and Madison, they really, really like Lewis Carroll. And one of them, in fact, has the description of a snark, that poem, in calligraphy in his office, on a poster kind of thing, framed in his office. But it was also, and the video game that had been mentioned earlier was titled Bojum Hunt. It's a reference to both, but it's also, they made that game based on their work on Genesis, so there are some elements of it that are similar, and they decided to have a little bit of fun. Because this is, they figured they got another day, so they're trying to get everything scrubbed off of Regulus 1. Get Genesis moved, so that when Starfleet, Khan, comes, they, there's nothing there for them. And they're kind of upset that, man, we're going to lose the game. We've been working so hard on this. But then they had an idea. They're going to be looking for something when they get here. And it also explains, they actually started their own video game company before graduate school. And were pretty successful. And in part because they were making the games for space stations like Regular One, where you're so far out there, it's like you really need something for entertainment. So it was these games, and it's like, we'll dump all the memory except for the hunk of memory that stores Bojum Hunt, and that's what Starfleet will find when they get here. Khan will find when he gets here. And it is funny, because when he does get there, because we'll be there in 3 days. No, we'll be there in 2. They don't know that. But when getting there and actually seeing a screen, and it starts with the opening that is similar to the Genesis summary, Khan is like, I have it. What the hell is this? It's yeah. Okay, so yeah, it is just it is a nice touch, and even though both Dell and Vance die by the end of the chapter, are killed by Khan. In fact, it is specifically Khan. You really do get a lot of them here, and it's pretty neat. I like them. It's a very good chapter. I'm very happy with the writing of this chapter, of this whole book so far. So yeah, we also get... Okay, so Dell and Vance and Carol and David are human. There's also the two Deltans. Jeddah and I don't remember the other name. Zinaida. Zinaida. I'm going with Zinaida. But there is some. Oh yeah. Just one enters the room and it just does a whole Delton thing, which technically shouldn't be based on what motion picture it's said. That it's a thing when entering an area with people you're unfamiliar with. They'd been together for at least a year, maybe two, so she shouldn't really be having this effect on them, but is what it is. There's a lot of like retconning here for the Deltons. I'm good with that because the motion picture was lousy, including with that. But yeah, no Delton would ever permit her or himself to become physically involved with a human being. The idea was ethically inconceivable, for no human could tolerate the intensity of the intimacy. Which, it's actually funny. I was kind of expecting one thing to happen a little later with that, but it's still that is like, well, that flies in the face of the Decca Ilea romance. I'm okay with it though. I'm okay with it. Which, by the way, having finally watched the motion picture, I actually like it less than the book, and the book I didn't like. The hunting of the Snark. Okay, that's where a lot of the stuff came from. Okay. And we do start to get a little bit between Del and Vance. Sorry, Del. Yeah, Del and Vance. For all our Lewis Carroll recitations, for all our doing amateur comedian numbers at seminars, hell, even for all the fun we've had, we've been hiding out from the implications of our work. This has been inevitable since the minute we figured out how to break up quarks en masse without a cyclotron. So it's basically exactly what McCoy was pointing out earlier, that this is by nature a weapon, and it's like that's kind of what he's saying. We've never even thought about it. We just kept doing this stuff. But there's then the response of, what, are you thinking we should just hand over to Reliant? No, I'm not saying that, but this is scary shit we're doing here, and we've not really stopped and thought about it. And one thing else I do want to add with the whole our amateur comedian numbers at seminars, the Lewis Carroll recitations, I would not be surprised. I've not been to any scientific seminar. I know plenty of people that have. I could probably ask them, and someone might say, "Oh yeah, there's a karaoke. Oh yeah, we always have like karaoke afterwards." And it's like, it's really fun to see a bunch of PhDs and professors from across the country and even across the world get together and start singing like that. I mean, it's just the people. They are people. They want to have fun as well. As I put in one of the books, everybody has a favorite cookie. Okay, I was like, that is a real thing. And I actually did once suggest to one friend of mine who was going to get to meet Nobel laureates and spend time with them. I even suggested bring recipes and see about trading with them. And it's like, what? And I actually never got a response, but I could believe it. It was something like, Jim, that's a terrible idea. I have such an opportunity to talk with them. And you're saying recipes, like, look, they will never forget you, for one thing, if you do this. But there's also, they are people. If you bring cookie recipes, they're probably going to say, yeah, my favorite cookie is this. And you're going to have a conversation now. That's actually kind of cool when you think about it. I mean, and it is that element of I do believe you want to, even if they are somebody to idolize, even if they are somebody that you can learn so much from, don't just approach them as that. Approach them as people. They have favorite cookies, so do that. Maybe even bring cookies with you. That wouldn't have worked in that case. But, bring cookies with you, maybe. Have the recipes there. But it's like, why not? It's weird in that it's unusual, but it's not weird in that it's wrong. No, it's just unusual. And as I said, they'll remember you, and it might be a really awesome conversation you then have. Plus, I wouldn't. I would think that T-shirt wouldn't be so bad. I talked to a Nobel laureate, and all I got was a cookie recipe. Sounds silly, but it would be valuable. Um. Okay, there's a lot then before I get to the next highlight because everything is ready to be moved somewhere. We've not been told where yet. When suddenly the alarms go off. Excuse me. So Vance has already gone down. Well, Vance and Dell are moving. Vance is faster, so he gets up there and is basically caught by Khan's people first. Dell, seeing this, is like, okay, this is bad. Ducks into a room, gets the computer, and tells it to vent the memory because the memory has to be chilled by liquid hydrogen. So it's basically, hey, if I can, we were just going to vent that into space. I just need to trigger that. It takes a while, but he does that. Except for the one thing, has Bojan hunt. But ultimately, they are using tricorders, find him, break in the door, and Dell, Vance, and Zenaida, the Delton woman, are all brought into the main room along with Jan and Yoshi. Jan is the janitor, Yoshi is the chef. They're all brought there to be questioned. And initially, Dell's like, okay, these are not Starfleet. They're in ragtag stuff. They're not dressed in Starfleet uniforms. But then eventually does see Chekhov and Terrell and like, okay, no, maybe this is Star. But things do go in a way where it's like, no, this isn't right. McCann starts interrogating. And when realizing that, I want to see if I can find that. No, it's earlier still. Yeah, Vance tried arguing they're just technicians. That didn't work because Chekhov is there and is like, nope, that's this guy. So Khan strikes him. In a little bit, though, he cuts the throats of both Jan and Yoshi because they have no use to him. Shows what a fool he is. A good chef is hard to find. I'm sorry, I also was just talking about recipes. I have to make that line. I have to give that line. But yeah, Yoshi, his throat was cut so quickly that couldn't even yell out. Jan, however, was cut poorly because it describes that he, despite the throat being cut, is like still able to move and such. So not an instant kill, because that's not what Khan wanted to do. Dell charges at Khan, which Khan's response is, well, like Dell is going for his throat, and Khan just stabs him in the side, which he doesn't even realize initially. Then Khan's people pull him off, and eventually he realizes, oh, I'm bleeding, and very badly. And despite that being the case, and also Khan then has him strung up, and despite it, he's the one who's dying here. Tell me about Genesis, Dr. March. Dell tried to take a breath. The knife wound radiated pain. No, he said. Khan hardly moved. The steel rod flicked out and struck Dell's side. He took apart a tripod and has this about meter-long piece of steel. It hurt so much Dell could not even cry out. He gasped. Don't, Vance yelled. For God's sake, stop it. Khan did not even bother to ask another question. Slowly, methodically, with the precision of obsession, he beat Dell unconscious. Something I skipped over getting there, but I remember now, is Khan had all of his people leave the room for that. So it's just him, Dell, Vance, and Zenaida. They're there. That's how confident Khan is. All of them have left. Even Joachim. He is outside hearing all of this. He's outside. And we also... Joachim is... I really like this character so much. Because we are getting so much more about him here. And there's the next highlight here. But Khan he's just evil at this point. Or is he? You'll understand that shortly. For 15 years, Khan had dedicated himself to the survival of his followers, when he himself had nothing left to live for. Nothing but revenge. Bitterness and hatred had overwhelmed him. Joachim held desperately to the conviction that when his vengeance was behind him, Khan could find himself again. That somehow, someday, Joachim would regain the man to whom he had sworn his loyalty and his life. I gave my word, Joachim said. This is after he's been questioned for why is he doing this? Why isn't he helping them? And that's why. Because even though he does have a conscience, Joachim, of all of them, it is depicted, definitely has a conscience. There's also mention of, even when Khan was slitting throats, some of his own people were like gasped in shock. That they were themselves were horrified by it. But yeah, it's Joachim is not a bad dude, but he is dedicated to Khan and has that hope for him. He does love the man. But eventually he leaves, and Joachim was actually expecting that Khan would go in immediately after. He visited and he gave a stimulant to Del to wake him up, because Khan is certain he will give him answers. But now they're left alone. And Zenaida, being Delton, has some telepathic power. And actually comes over to Del, and she touched Del's forehead. Her hands were wondrously cool and soothing. She had never touched him before. She'd never touched any... It was mentioned earlier, neither Delton have allowed any of the humans to physically touch them at all, which... And I get it, that also seems a little extreme, but anyhow. She bent down and gently kissed his lips. Vance grabbed her shoulder and pulled her away. What are you doing? Vance, even a Delton cannot kill with one kiss, she said softly. But I can give him... Vance, I can give him the strength to die, if he chooses. And she does. She is able to do that, and he does allow himself to be consumed by shadows rather than allow Khan to gain anything from him. There's also the mention, though, that whatever the mental connection that she forms with him was also enough to purge the impact of the stimulant he was given. Yeah, so Khan, as we enter the room, Joachim is there. Del dies, and Joachim comes up to see if there's a pulse or anything. He's dead, Joachim said, and then he lied to Khan for the first time in his life. I'm sorry, my lord. So, alright, Khan is now like, I got another one. So he's going to turn and start doing that, at which point, and it's also, Khan has Vance strung up by his ankles to be hung from the ceiling, but also makes a cut above the jugular. Not severing the artery, but above it, so that he will slowly bleed out. And even makes a point, it takes about 10 minutes to drain you of blood. Give me what I want, and I will save your life. He may say, I'm going to make it so I can save your life. Joachim could not bear to watch Khan destroy another human being. He fled. In the main lab, he contacted Reliant. Hang on. Sorry. I want to make sure it didn't go to sleep while I was reading this. He contacted Reliant and beamed on board. He ran to the captain's cabin, which Khan had taken over as his own. A sand tank stood on the desk. Joachim dug frantically through it with the strainer until he caught 2 eels. He dumped them into a box, raced back to the starship's transporter room, and returned to Space Lab. He ran, gasping for breath, to the small lab Khan had made a prison. Joachim was too late to save Madison. He stopped, staring horrified at the pool of blood. So, like, he desperately is trying to actually save these people, and he is, to a degree, defying Khan as well with doing that, because he is still a good man, but he is so attached to Khan that he wants to see Khan redeemed, I guess is a way to put it, and is so attached to that he doesn't just leave or try to stop Khan. But it also is kind of funny. Yeah, we can use these eels instead. It's like, that still kills them. It's still torturous. Technically, it doesn't make sense, but anyway. So now it's just Zenaida, and Khan stood before. She met his gaze without flinching. He seemed offended that she did not fear him. So, this is not what ends up happening with her. But there was a part of me that I was kind of hoping that with the whole mention about the intimacy could kill a human, because part of me was actually kind of hoping she would try to use that to kill Khan. Because it would have been interesting, and not necessarily like going to bed with him or something like that, but if she could, through a kiss, try to so connect with him, because I could see Khan, if that started, I could see Khan recognizing that and realizing this is a way to gain information directly from her mind, and so going with it. And even as she may try to start using it to kill him, he could be arrogant enough to believe his greater intellect would allow him to survive. And perhaps he still would. He would in fact survive it, or he would recognize what's going on and then just like physically crush her or something like that to end it. I was really hoping for something like that to just give her a very strong Delton moment kind of thing. I don't want to just say strong female moment, because technically the dude could do it as well. But still, it's like, that actually would have been really neat. No, that's not what ends up happening. But still. So, Joachim has the box now and approaches Khan. He held his breath, for he could not know how Khan would react, giving him the box. Khan opened the box, looked inside, and smiled. He set it down and put his arms around Joachim. You know my needs better than myself, Khan said. I am grateful to you, Joachim. I could not love you more if you were my son. He will be himself again, Joachim thought, close to tears, as soon as this is over. So, what follows, because that's near the end of the chapter, is, yes, they put the eel into Zenaida's head, but she, just as Del had, chose death, rather, so Khan will get nothing. But she does something else. So it is described here that she and Jeddah, being lovers, have a psychic connection. And she is trying, because he's not there. Jeddah, David, and Carol are actually still on the space station, but are like hidden away and are moving around and trying to figure out what's going on. Genesis is secured. They're not with it, though. So she tries to use that psychic link to send as much information as possible, as much emotion as possible to Jeddah, that basically we're all dead and there is no hope. Not as a give up hope, but a do not try to save us. You need to run. She tries to give him that. And it actually does come through, because just as they are like opening up a panel to look down into the lab and see what's happening is when she screams out in pain before dying. And at the same time, that's also when Jeddah suddenly feels and collapses down. And Carol is like, what is it? And he actually like crosses his arms like this and kind of holds him up and rolls away from her so she won't touch him. And he then explains that they're dead. They're all dead. We need to run. And so they do. Which, by the way, the whole not wanting to be touched like that, I kind of interpret that as he is, because their psychic connection has been severed as well by Zenaida's choice. And it even mentions like that is a forever thing. So even if she did survive, potentially they would never get it back. I kind of interpret him not wanting to be touched is not just practicing the discipline they've been doing, but also saying like he is so psychically alert at this time that if Carol were to touch him, it would be excruciating for him, maybe even for her. But in any case, it's yeah, we gotta go. We have to run. Okay. I just wanted to quickly see in the next chapter we are back on Enterprise because it was talking about Spock. And I think I saw Savick there being mentioned too. So, yeah. So, I'm just thinking, based on what I know happens next with the movie, what's going to happen here? Those three are going to have to rush to the transporter and beam to where they've secured Genesis, which is within the I don't remember the name of the planetoid that they're technically orbiting, but they beam in there where the Genesis cave is. It is interesting that Khan, you'd expect, would tear apart the station trying to find Genesis or anyone else that can tell him things. But getting to the transporter doesn't recognize what's going on there. Doesn't try to beam down as well. But instead goes for the gambit of Chekhov and Terrell are Starfleet officers. He can leave them here, and once the Enterprise comes, they will surely bring them into the fold, because are we not all brothers in arms? In arms kind of thing. Oh yeah, it's also true. He wants to leave and intercept the Enterprise. There's that as well. That'll probably be in the next chapter. So that will also mean Peter's death will likely be in the next chapter. But it does seem odd that he doesn't just find the transporter and is like, those are curious coordinates. Let's follow them. He doesn't do that, so not entirely sure why that is. I mean, yeah, sure, there's the whole, he doesn't want to miss running into Kirk. But it's still, he could have somebody investigate that, I feel. So anyway, so yeah, we'll be stopping now. See you for the next. The chapters are long, the videos are long. There's a lot to talk about and a lot that I like, which I'll just say because I know a lot of this is me just basically reading through and talking about what's in there. If that's what I'm doing, it's because I enjoy it. If I'm not giving great criticism, like really getting into, there are these problems or those problems, it's because I'm enjoying it. I think that this is very well written. We're gonna try to look into other things that Vonda here has written. Because I am legitimately curious, but that'll have to wait. I wouldn't read them until I get through the rest of the book. So yeah, because who knows? Maybe we get to search for Spock or Voyage Home, and it's like, oh, this is crap. I don't want to read it. Hopefully that won't be the case. But in theory, it could happen. All right. See you next time.